Hi, it's Cynthia at Pretty Paper Blackbirds. Thanks for watching. Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for this fourth and final video in my Halloween 2022 card making series. I hope you've had a chance to check out the other 3 videos and you've picked up a tip or trick that you can use in your card making. So today I am going to be using these 2 die sets. This is the Lawn Fawn Pumpkin House die set. I'll be using just the dies here on the right hand side. And also the Simon Says stamp Ghouls and Tree stamp set. I'll be using the tree from this set. And here's the paper for today's set. I have a small piece of vellum. And this is just a piece of watercolor paper. I'll use a very small amount of this watercolor paper just to cut out the moon. This is cold pressed paper, has a little bit of texture. And then 4 pieces of just cardstock. This blue is a Hero Arts, Hero Hues heavier cardstock, and then I have a black, a lavender color, and then sort of a lime green. These are just from my paper stash. Okay, I have all of my die cuts here. I cut the tree, the door, the steps, and the 2 windows out of the black cardstock, the stem out of the white cardstock, 3 of the large flowering vines and 1 small flowering vine out of this lime green, and the base for the pumpkin house out of this lavender. I have one more element that I want to cut, so it is going to require stamping. It is the only stamping on this card, but it's this cute little mushroom toadstool here from the Lawn Fawn Terrific Day set. So I'm just going to stamp this with a small stamp block. I think I need 2 or 3. So easier to just pick this up with a stamp block and stamp these out very quickly rather than getting out the MISTI for 3 little stamps. So I think I'm going to stamp these in ground espresso. I'm going to use some brown and tan colors to color these with Copic markers. So I'm going to just quickly stamp out 3. Leaving some space in between because I will die cut these. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and color these with my Copic markers. I am using E79 and E99. This is cashew and baked clay. So I'm just going to go around these little dots. We'll leave those blank. Not really doing a lot of shading on these. They're very small, but these 2 colors of marker give it quite a bit of impact. So I'm going to go ahead and die cut these, and then I am going to put some glow in the dark paste on top. I want these little dots here on the mushrooms to glow in the dark. So I'm going to go ahead and die cut these, and then I'll work on the paste. Okay, I have my little die cut mushrooms, and I am going to move on with inking up some of these pieces. So I'm going to start with this little pumpkin house base. And the first thing I want to do for this, that piece of vellum that I pulled out earlier, I want to use this pumpkin die. I'm going to die cut this piece of vellum, exact same size as this base piece. Okay, I have my die cut vellum piece that fits perfectly behind my pumpkin. I have cut out the windows and the door on my pumpkin base piece. And I'm going to start with this pumpkin piece. I want to ink this up. I'm going to use Dusty Concord and Black Soot to create a little bit of dimension here. So I will start with the Dusty Concord, and I just want to go around the outside edges. Give this a little bit of shading. I want to keep the middle part of this fairly light. It'll give us a little bit of dimension here and make this pumpkin look a little rounder. Okay, moving on to the black soot. I don't want a lot of this color, so I'm really just going to go around the edges, kind of going for more of a whimsical look here rather than a spooky Halloween look. You could also use this pumpkin in fall cards. I'm not really putting any Halloween elements here. It's really just the ink colors, I think, that are giving the suggestion of a Halloween card. Okay, I'm going to add a little more texture to my house by creating some splatters. So I'm going to start with black. I'm just using Mars Black acrylic paint, very small amount. A little bit of water. I'm going to do this on a paper towel, and I want to test it out first. I want fairly large drops, not small drops. I want to make sure that it's not going to do something like that. So I'm going to rinse out my brush, and then I want to do the same thing with white. Okay, I'm going to use titanium white for my white splatters. Same thing, very, very small amount of paint, water, and mix to a consistency that gives you the splatters that you are looking for. Okay, looks great. I'm going to clean up my brush, clean up my paint tray, and I will move on with this pumpkin base. Okay, my pumpkin base is dry. I'm going to give this a little more dimension around the edges. So I am just using a Copic marker C9, and I'm going to go around the edges of this pumpkin and just lightly apply some alcohol ink with my marker tilted a bit. I don't want a heavy line. So I'm mostly inking up the edge, but I'm also getting a little bit of ink right on the front of the die cut. Okay, I'm liking that look. Okay, moving on to the vellum piece. I am going to use another Copic marker, YR14, on this vellum piece, and I really just want to highlight the inside of the door and the window. So I don't need to be extremely precise with my coloring here, just laying down some color will do. Okay, that will work. Next, I'll attach this pumpkin die cut down to the vellum piece, and then I'll be ready to glue down the windows and the door. Okay, I want to give the windows and the doors a little bit of dimension. So I am going to use some, let's see, Lawn Fawn. This is stencil paste. It is clear. So I'm going to go ahead and ink these, and it really does give a really nice look. It is almost like a wood grain look if you use the right brush. So I have a small brush here that I use for such things. If you're going to use a brush, you have to be very careful to wash this brush as soon as you are finished. You can see maybe I didn't do a great job the last time I used this one, but the bristles will be very stiff. The brush will basically be unusable if you don't clean it fairly quickly. So I'm going to use top to bottom strokes, and I'll let the bristles of the brush create that wood texture. And I'm not putting anything inside the door. I've seen some really cute cards where there's a little trick-or-treater or a ghost peeking out of the door. Love this die set. So many cute things that you can do with it. But I'm going to keep my door closed, so I don't need to worry about this texture paste. Not sure if you can see the texture there, but it is really a cool look. Okay, my stencil paste is dry. I'm going to go ahead and glue these down to the pumpkin house base. And I'll put something on top of this while it's drying. Gluing to vellum can be very tricky to get that to stay. It tends to want to pop up. So I will put something heavy on and let it sit while I am working on the rest of the elements of this little pumpkin house. Okay, moving on to this stem and this tree. We'll do the tree first. This is a fairly easy technique. What I'm going to do is just ink up this tree with some white pigment ink, and it's really just going to mostly look like sort of a reflected glow of the moon on this side of the tree. So I'll have the tree over on the left. The moon will be up in the top right, so I want this glow to really just be hitting this side of my tree. And I'm not using a lot of this pigment ink. I'm brushing most of it off of my brush. Too much and it might look like the tree is snowy. I think that looks great. Okay, that was Hero Arts Hero Hues Pigment Ink in Unicorn. And now for this stem. I am going to use just black soot, and I want to ink up only the outsides of this stem. I want it to look like a white stem that has a little bit of black. So again, taking most of the ink off of my brush, I'm just going around the outside edges. Okay, I'm going to move on to flowers. So I am going to use, let's see, I am going to use Rusty Hinge and Seedless Preserves for my bottom layers here. So I think I'll start with Seedless Preserves. So I'm going to ink up the flower part with the Seedless Preserves. Love this color. Again, this little detail blending brush is absolutely perfect for doing this very detailed small work. I'm going to let this dry, and I am going to ink it twice because I do want a lot of color for these flowers. So I'm trying not to use too many colors. It's a very narrow color palette in this card. I'm going for a whimsical dark, dark as in nighttime, not dark as in any way sinister look for this card. So this Seedless Preserves is really not that far away from the dusty Concord. So all right, so I'm going to go back in with this Rusty Hinge, and I am just going to ink up a little bit of this vine. I like the green, but I don't want it to be so springtime green. I'm going over it a bit just to give it a little bit of more, I guess, of an autumn look, a fall look. Okay. I'm going to go over the flowers one more time with the seedless preserves. Okay. I need to give these little flowering vines just a moment to dry, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to add one more layer for texture and some sparkle. Okay, last step for my little flowers. I am going to use this Gina K Designs Glitz Glitter Gel. This is, it's white. It actually dries somewhat translucent though. So I am going to use my little crafty paintbrush here. And I'm just going to apply a little bit to each flower. These are dry now, and it's just a little bit glittery. Really brings out the purple of the flower. I don't want a lot of texture and dimension. I want mostly the glitter and shine. Okay, next up is the moon. So I have a piece of watercolor paper here. I'm going to use Distress Spray Stain and Distress Mica sprays to create the moon. And then I will die cut it with this, I think it's 1 5/8 inch stitched circle. So I think I'm going to do this in a spray box because it can get very messy. And I am going to start by just using a very fine misting of water, not very much. It is literally half of a squirt fine mist. And I'll start with the shaded lilac. This is Distress Spray Stain. And this is my primary color, so I will give that fairly healthy amount of spray stain. And I'm going to heat set this between every color. I don't want my colors to mix. I want them to lay on top of each other as much as I can possibly control that. Okay, I have dried my first color. I am going to move on to this brushed pewter mica spray. Again, I'm going to dry this with my heat tool. And last but not least, Distress Mica Stain in Black Soot. And I want a fine mist of black soot. I don't want a lot of this. It's really just more of an accent. So I'm gonna do my, my partial pump spray technique when I only want a tiny bit of color. Okay, I want a little more shaded lilac. Feel like it's a little bit light on this purple. Let's see if I can get something good out of that. Okay, one more heat set and then I'm ready to die cut. Okay, so again, this is a 1 5/8 inch stitched circle. I am going to line this up, find the best area that I can for my moon, and then I will tape this down, die cut this, and then I'm going to use this circle die cut again to cut a crescent moon shape out. Okay, so here's my moon die cut. It was a circle. I cut it and then I just moved my die over and I cut again to get this little crescent. I'll save this piece because I save everything, but what in the world will I ever do with that? Last element to create for all of the elements for the front of the card, I'm going to die cut and emboss this fence. This is from the Pretty Pink Posh Halloween Borders. It does thankfully come with a die, because that would be interesting to fussy cut. So I am going to ink this up on my Misty. This is a heavyweight black cardstock. Doesn't need to be the exact size. I'm not going to use this entire die. I'm sorry, this entire stamp. So that should be plenty of space. I will go ahead and use an anti-static powder tool because it is black cardstock. And I'll ink this up twice since I'm embossing, and I want a really good impression. So this is just Versamark embossing ink. I'm going to use just white detail embossing powder. I'm not too concerned about the extra powder. I am going to die cut this, so you won't really be able to see anything outside of this little fence. Looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and die cut this, and then I will have all of the elements I need, and I can start to create my front panel for the card. So I am going to ink this up again. I am using my spray box, and I am going to use one of the new Tim Holtz colors. So beautiful. This is Winter Frost. It is a distressed mica stain. I'm going to spray pretty liberally on this background. I'm using very few different colors of ink on this background. So I want a starry night sky. So I am going to give this quite a bit of ink. This dries very, very quickly. So once it looks like most of this has dried, I'm going to come back in with some Distress Spray Stain in Black Soot. And I don't want a lot of the Black Soot. Again, I'll give it a second to dry. It dries a lot lighter than it goes on. Okay, that is perfect. I'm going to give this just a second to thoroughly dry, and then I am going to, this is a stitched rectangle, and I am going to die cut. I really want a stitched border for this front panel. Okay, I've die cut the background for my panel. I have this nice little border I can use for something else. Okay, I am ready to start adding the elements to the front of my card. I'm going to be careful not to put foam tape where you can see inside the windows, because you will be able to see it from the outside because of that vellum. So I'm going to be very careful to keep it up and away from the top of the window. card front is complete. I am going to glue this panel down to an A2 card base. This is Hero Arts Hero Hues 111-pound cardstock. The color is Eggplant. I've scored this piece at 4 1/4, and I will give it a fold and a press, and I'm ready to adhere the card front. Okay, that looks like a very healthy amount of glue. And I'm going to be very careful here. I've worked so hard on this. I want to make sure this is perfectly lined up on the front of this panel. Oh, I love this card. Another last minute decision here. I'm going to create a panel on the inside. I'm going to do just a basic white panel. I have used a stitched rectangle to trim this down and quickly went through all of my Halloween sets, and this hand-lettered Halloween from Simon Says stamp, I used this in the last video. I think I'm going to use the Hey Pumpkin sentiment. All right, I want to use a color I've used on the front of the card to ink this up. So I think I will go with the Dusty Concord. Yes. And you know what? It's just paper. I can make a new one if I want. Let's use some tape runner. I'm going to make sure this is thoroughly dry. And it looks like it might not be. I did have to stamp it 3 times. I'm going to hit this with the heat tool really quickly to make sure it's completely dry before I flip it over. Okay, that is great. Okay, last step in this card. I have this Studio Light glow in the dark paste, and it's like a pudding consistency. It's fairly thin. So I was able to get some into this small bottle. This squeeze bottle has a very, very thin tip, and I have taken this bottle and I have created some dots of glow-in-the-dark paste on some of these elements. And the last thing I'm going to do is I am going to squeeze out a little bit on my tree just to give my tree a little bit of dimension. This is a cute card. I'm very, very happy with this. I hope you enjoyed this 4th card in my series. I am looking forward to a fall card making series coming up in a week or 2. I hope you'll join me for that series as well.